To speak more on this, let's now welcome Christine Nxumalo. She is a committee member for the families. Christine, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. So there's been not much movement, since the Pretoria High Court handed down that rather scathing judgment in this matter. Let's first talk about what is contained in your letter of demands to the NPA, just some of the highlights.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Basically, what our demands are is that as families, we request that the NPA keep us in the loop about the process and progress made. That's one. The second is that we need to move. It cannot take another 8 years for us to get to a point of them appearing in court. We need to move at a much faster pace, especially because this time we now have the High Court judgment supporting our call for justice.
And you've been very vocal about this. As someone who has lost a loved one, your sister, and who has been on one of the stalwarts, of the family committee for people who died as a result of the closure of Life Esidimeni, how do you then view how, in your case, the slow wheels of justice are turning, and perhaps your views on the lack of accountability, especially about the complicity of some of the government officials that have been implicated?
It is painful. I can't begin to explain to you. It is very, very painful. It feels like we're living in a country where the criminal or the accused get better treatment, get better listened to, get to hear. It's almost like we are caring more for their rights versus the rights of the families or the victims. I can't tell you. The gentleman the advocate is the very same person we were crying to 8 years ago when we asked for an inquest. And we're right back here again, asking him to expedite, prosecuting. It can't be that victims are always the ones begging for justice. When is it ever just done the way it's supposed to be done? That's how I feel. I feel like I'm being let down. That if I was to stop, nothing will happen. That's what it feels like.
And in fact, today we just heard, of course, in that previous clip that the director of public prosecutions says he will expedite the decision on whether or not to prosecute former health MEC Qadani Mahlangu and the former director of mental health, Dr. Makgabo Manamela. I know you said this has been 8 years in the making. Who else would you like to see in that list being held criminally liable?
Look, we've got a whole host of people. You've got the HOD that also must account for what he has done. You have got the deputy directors that were involved. You also have the people in the regions, and also the NGOs that need to be held accountable. So it's not a two-man show or two-woman show in this case. There is a host of people. But for now, because the High Court actually said that there is a direct link to the decisions made to these two, I suppose if it's these two in the dock, at least it leads to accountability. It may not be the best accountability that we want, but at least it means you cannot treat South Africans like that. You cannot treat vulnerable people like this. You just cannot treat people like this, especially if you're a person in power. It's not allowed.
And of course, one of the things that we've come to realize with this particular case is that, not only were people's lives taken, but also those that are alive, like yourselves, your lives have really taken a different turn completely. Just talk to us about that time when you decided to speak out. Essentially, what you did was blow the whistle on what was happening within the Department of Health and within the Life Esidimeni saga, as it were. Did it come at a cost?
A very high cost. A very, very high cost. I work for government, so you can imagine. And I was part of a party at the time in the branch. I was in the branch leadership. And I was shunned. I was called a traitor. My kids have suffered my kids suffer from depression. We've had to go for counseling. My husband suffered, he has a heart condition that has left him in a very, very bad situation. So we basically are in I cannot believe this, but I can now understand why my niece felt that everything was just never going to be the same again for her to die the way she died a year later. So you can imagine how it felt like. I mean, I've never been able to move. I've literally been blocked from getting positions, even though I qualified. You know, I'm overqualified for where I am. You know, so I truly believe that these are the repercussions of standing up and doing the right thing. And I think at some point, a senior person told me to my face at some point that they had cut off all myself, you know, like cut off all the lifeline around me with the attempt that I will just shrivel and disappear. And when I didn't do that, they didn't know what to do. And that's where I'm coming from. So it's not a joke when you say, Eugene, it was it's whistleblower treatment. I've been saying this for a very long time. And unfortunately, no one has taken me seriously.
Well, Christine, we'll definitely be keeping tabs on this particular story and, in fact, to see what will then be done in terms of expediting, at least, hearing and making sure that your letters of demands are met in as far as this is concerned. But thank you so much for your time. Christine Nxumalo is a committee member of the Families of the Life Esidimeni saga. Of course, this is a developing story as we monitor what then the Director of Public Prosecutions in Gauteng will be doing with that letter of demands.